Stories at Work.
Welcome back to Stories at Work. Today we're breaking down a dramatized and fictional story from the world of IT, incident response, and access controls. I'm not the kind of guy who thinks work is family, but I did believe in responsibility. That morning I was half asleep, barefoot in my apartment, laptop open on the kitchen counter, when my phone lit up with the on-call alert. Not a gentle ping, the kind of alarm that means the next hour decides whether your company keeps its biggest client or loses them in public. I rolled my shoulders once, took a breath, and opened the dashboards. Everything was red. Our largest customer, Kestrel Pay, was degrading hard. Checkout latency climbing, error rates spiking, retreats piling up like cars in a tunnel. Their money moved through our rails. When our rails bent, their world shook. I'd been the on-call lead long enough to know the difference between noise and the start of a spiral. This was a spiral. I joined the incident bridge, voice steady, and started assigning owners like I'd done 100 times. Eamon, logs and tracing. Jessa, load balancer health. Tolan, certificate chain check. I'm taking point on mitigation and change control. People answered fast. That's the thing about a good team. When it matters, nobody needs motivation speeches. They just move. And I move too. Not because I love the job, because I hated letting systems fail while I was watching. Within minutes, the shape of the problem emerged. A certificate rotation had been scheduled overnight for one of our downstream services. Half the fleet had the new chain. The other half was still presenting the old one. The load balancer was distributing traffic like nothing was wrong. So clients were flipping between works and fails. With every retry, it was the worst kind of outage. Intermittent, messy, and fast-moving. The fix was clear, but it wasn't something I could do with regular permissions. The relevant configuration path was gated behind our privileged access controls. For good reason. In the wrong hands, it could burn the entire environment down. Emergency access was allowed, but it required a ticket, a reason, a rollback plan, and a manager's written approval. That process was my safety rail. It wasn't bureaucracy to me. It was what kept a bad day from becoming a lawsuit. So I opened an emergency change request and started filling it out, line by line, like I was laying down track in front of a moving train. Root cause, partial certificate propagation. Impact, payment disruptions for enterprise customer. Mitigation, rotate chain across fleet. Invalidate stale nodes. Restart listener on affected segments. Rollback, revert to last known good chain. Drain nodes, restore config from versioned snapshot. Then I pinged my manager, Bram Hollis. Bram loved to talk about velocity and ownership. He also loved to disappear the second velocity came with consequences. Still, I needed that written approval. I needed the company to stand behind the decision. I wrote, emergency change needed. Kestrel Pay is degraded. I can stabilize in 10 to 15 minutes with break glass. Please approve in ticket. He read it. I saw the indicator. 3 dots appeared, then nothing. Another minute passed. I pinged again, polite and brief. This time Bram replied, do what you need. Just don't make it a big thing. That line didn't approve anything. It didn't deny anything. It was a foggy middle, perfect for someone who wanted results without fingerprints. I stared at it, jaw tight. On the bridge, someone said, client is asking for an ETA. Finance is now on their call. Kestrel Pay wasn't a small business. Their contract had teeth. They billed penalties by the hour when our service failed. I'd seen the clause before. Nobody said it out loud on the call, but everyone felt the pressure. Every minute had a price tag. I made a decision. I attached Bram's message to the ticket. As manager direction, requested break glass access through our privileged system, and moved into the remediation steps. I wasn't reckless. I was careful. I staged changes, verified checkpoints, and kept the rollback plan ready like a parachute. I even wrote a quick handoff note in the incident channel. just in case I got hit by a bus mid-fix. Then the privileged access system responded, request pending, awaiting approval. Of course it did. I needed Bram to click one button. One, the simplest act of leadership imaginable. And Bram was nowhere to be found. I called him. He didn't pick up. I tried again. Still nothing. So I did the next best thing. I escalated to the duty manager on rotation and asked them to approve the emergency access based on the incident severity. That was allowed, if they were willing to own it. They were about to approve when the bridge call tone changed. A new voice joined. Smooth, formal, practiced. Silas? The voice said. I glanced at the participant list and felt my stomach tighten. Nyla, VAR, Human Resources. It didn't make sense. HHR didn't join incident bridges. HR didn't show up when latency graphs screamed. HR showed up when someone wanted a clean narrative. I muted for half a second and said, Nyla, I'm in an active incident. Her voice stayed calm like she was reading from a card. Silas, I need you to stop all work immediately. This call is to inform you that your employment is being terminated, effective today. I didn't speak at first, not because I was confused, because I was trying to stop myself from saying something that could be used against me later. In the background, I could hear my team still talking, still fighting the outage, still counting on me to finish what I'd started. I unmuted, carefully. You're firing me? Right now? I asked. While the client is down? Yes, Nyla said. You need to step away from company systems. You will receive separation details shortly. I stared at my screen. The emergency access request was still open. The fix was half planned and half executed. We were one approval away from stabilizing the service. And then the worst part happened. Not the firing. Not even the timing. The door to the war room opened behind me. Bram walked in like he'd been there the whole time. He looked at my laptop, then at me, and his expression didn't show panic. It showed relief. He said quietly enough that only I could hear it. Step away, Silas. You've done enough. And in that moment, I understood something that made the air feel colder. This wasn't happening during the incident. This was happening because of it. Bram didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He stood behind me with that calm executive posture, hands relaxed, shoulders open, like he was the adult in the room and I was the problem that needed removing. On the bridge, the client was asking for an ETA again. Someone from our sales team was speaking in apology fragments. My engineers were still working the technical angles, but everyone kept circling back to the same choke point. We needed privileged access to finish the fix safely, and my privileged request was still sitting there, waiting for approval. I muted my mic and turned slightly toward Bram. Who's taking over? I asked. The break glass request is tied to my ticket. I can hand off, but you need a named owner. Bram's eyes flicked to the screen like it was mildly inconvenient. We'll be fine, he said. It was the kind of answer people give when they haven't actually looked at the details. I kept my tone flat. We're not fine. We're one approval away from stabilizing checkout. If you want me out, give me 10 minutes. I'll write a clean handoff with rollback steps. He smiled. Not a friendly smile, a managerial one. The smile that says you're about to be framed as difficult if you keep talking. No, he said. You're terminated. Follow policy. You don't touch anything. I held his gaze. Policy also says emergency remediation requires a documented approver. That's you. Click approve, then I'll hand off. He leaned in just a little. Don't tell me how policy works. That sentence lit something in me. Irritation, sharp and controlled. Because I wasn't telling him. I was trying to prevent a disaster he was walking into with his eyes open. But I didn't argue. Instead, I said, Okay, you want policy? Bram nodded once, slow. Exactly. Follow policy. So I did. I turned back to my laptop and opened the internal change ticket. My cursor hovered over the handoff note I'd started, a simple checklist of steps, links, and a rollback plan. I typed a single line. Terminated during active incident. Requesting confirmation of instruction to stop work. I wasn't even trying to be clever. Just clean. Just documented. Then my screen went black. Not a crash. Not a power flicker. A remote lock. A second later, a notification popped on my phone from our identity system. Access revoked. Email. VPN. Source control. Privileged access console. Everything, like a guillotine. Behind me, Bram exhaled in satisfaction. There, he said. Now we're compliant. I stood up slowly. On the bridge, I could still hear my team scrambling. Eamon. Load balancer config is locked. Who can push? Jessa. I don't have permission for that path. Tolan. The certificate chain mismatch is still present. We need the privileged route. Someone else. Client wants names. They're asking who authorized the delay. I wasn't even on the call anymore, but the sound of it kept hitting me through the speakers like a storm behind a wall. I turned to Bram. You just cut off the only person with the emergency request in flight. He shrugged. Someone else can request it. I felt my jaw tighten. No, they can request it, but it will queue. And without an approver, it will sit. That's how the control is designed. Bram's voice got colder. Not my problem. That was when Nyla's HR voice returned, still calm, still scripted. Silas, you'll need to return your laptop today. Please bring it to security. I looked at Nyla's name on the call list and realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think yet. This wasn't a messy decision made in the moment. This had been arranged. They waited until I was mid-fix, mid-incident, so the system would break in a way they could blame on me. And Bram was going to stand in front of everyone and say I was the reason it failed. I asked Nyla, are you instructing me not to access any company system? Yes, she replied. You are not authorized to perform any work. I kept my voice steady. I want that in writing. There was a pause, the smallest pause. Then Nyla said, you'll receive an email. I almost laughed. I didn't, because my email was already dead. I said, send it to my personal address, the one on file for payroll. Silence again. Bram cut in. Don't be dramatic. I looked at him, and for the first time I saw what he was really doing. He wasn't protecting the company. He was protecting himself from the audit trail. Because the moment he approved my break glass request, his name would sit next to the decision forever. A digital fingerprint in the one place his charm couldn't erase. So he chose the other path, revoke my access, let the outage worsen, and then tell the story like I'd walked away. I stepped back from the table and lifted my hand slightly, not as surrender, but as a visible boundary. Okay, I said. Policy says I stop, so I stop. Bram's smile widened, like he'd won something. And then my phone buzzed with a new message from the incident channel. Still visible because Slack on my phone hadn't refreshed permissions yet. A single line from our finance liaison. Reminder, Kestrel pay downtime penalty is $25,000 per hour. Clock started at 9. I read it twice. $25,000 per hour. That wasn't a threat. That was math. And Bram had just chosen to let the meter run. I put my phone in my pocket, picked up my laptop, still open, still black-screened, and walked towards security. Behind me, Bram said, loud enough for the room to hear, let's get someone who wants to help. I didn't turn around, because if I turned around, I might speak. And if I spoke, he'd twist it. So I kept walking, and I let policy do what it was built to do. Document the moment leadership decided to burn time instead of approve truth. That night, I stopped being the hero. By the time I got home, the adrenaline had burned off and left that empty, buzzing feeling behind your ribs, like your body still expects a threat, but there's nothing to hit. I set the laptop on my dining table and stared at it like it was evidence. Because that's what it was now, not a tool, not a job. A silent object that could either protect me or bury me, depending on how badly Bram wanted a scapegoat. My phone kept lighting up, unknown numbers, corporate numbers, a few that looked like they could be the client's bridge line. I didn't answer a single one, not because I didn't care what happened to Kestrel Pay, because I knew exactly what would happen if I said the wrong sentence to the wrong person. They'd twist it into Silas refused to help. They'd turn I'm not authorized into he abandoned us. They'd turn follow policy into he held us hostage. So I sat there and did the one thing I still controlled. I wrote the timeline. Not in a dramatic way, not like a diary, like an incident report. 8:15, alert triggered. 8:22, joined bridge, assigned owners. 8:31, identified certificate propagation issue. 8:40, opened emergency change ticket, wrote rollback plan. 8:46, messaged Bram for approval. 8:50, Bram replied with vague directive. 9:02, break glass request submitted, pending approval. 9:12, HR informed termination, instructed stop work. 9:14, access revoked remotely. I wrote names, times, exact words as close as I could remember. Then I took screenshots of the messages I still had. Bram's do what you need line, the finance liaison's penalty reminder, the identity alert showing access revoked. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being prepared. Because Bram wasn't the type to panic. He was the type to rewrite. Around midday, my doorbell rang. Not a neighbor, not a friend. A courier with a padded envelope and a forced polite smile. He handed me a packet from Lattice Warden. Separation paperwork, return instructions, a checklist, and a single-page letter. The letter was clean, generic, and cruel in its simplicity. Your employment has ended effective immediately. You are not authorized to access company systems, communicate on behalf of the company, or perform any work-related duties. They'd weaponize the policy line perfectly. If I helped, I violated it. If I didn't help, they'd blame me for not helping. I read it twice, then placed it on the table next to my notebook. The silence in my apartment was heavy. Then my phone buzzed again, this time a text from a number I recognized because I'd worked with him for years. Eamon Quill. Are you okay? I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. I'm fine. What's happening? His reply came fast. They're drowning. 2 words. No exaggeration. Then another message, a few seconds later. Bram's telling people you refuse to help unless they paid you. I felt my stomach drop so hard it almost made me dizzy. There it was, the narrative. He was building it while the system failed, because a failing system needs a villain. And Bram wanted that villain to be me. I didn't type an emotional response. I didn't even type a long one. I asked one question. Did he put that in writing? Eamon. No. On calls. He keeps saying Silas walked out, and Silas left us exposed. I took a slow breath. Spoken lies are smoke. Written lies are fuel. If Bram stayed verbal, he could always deny later. But if he wrote it, he'd trap himself, and Bram loved feeling safe, which meant he'd eventually write something. People like Bram always do, because they start to believe their own story. I texted Eamon again. Don't mention me in writing. Don't speculate. Just keep logs. Save bridge recordings if you can. Eamon. Client records everything. They're furious. That line made my pulse steady again, because client recordings weren't under Bram's control. If Kestrel Pay recorded the bridge, then Bram's version of events wasn't the only version. And recordings don't care about charm. An hour later, Eamon sent another update. They can't get break glass approved. Bram won't click it. He's pushing Jessa to just do it with whatever access she has. I closed my eyes for a second, because I knew exactly what just do it meant in Bram's language. It meant bypass controls, take shortcuts, and if it goes wrong, blame the person who touched the keyboard. I typed back, tell Jessa not to. She'll be the scapegoat. Eamon. I told her. She's scared. Bram's threatening to write her up. My jaw tightened again. Bram was doing what he always did under pressure, applying it downward, and that was the moment something shifted inside me. Not anger. Clarity. because I realized I wasn't watching a technical incident anymore. I was watching a leadership failure unfold in slow motion with a price tag attached. Then, late afternoon, my phone buzzed with something I didn't expect at all, an automated email from the privileged access system. It had my name on it. Subject: break glass request denied. Reason: requester no longer employed. I stared at that line until the meaning settled. The control system had stamped the sequence in plain language. Silas requested emergency access. The company terminated Silas. The company blocked the request. That wasn't my interpretation. That was the record. And if there was ever an audit, ever a legal review, ever a client dispute, that email would be the spine of the story. A few minutes later, Eamon texted again. Bram's trying to force a junior to use his credentials. My skin went cold. That wasn't just bad leadership. That was a control violation with a pulse. It meant Bram was about to do something desperate enough to create exactly the kind of evidence he'd tried to avoid by firing me. And then another message came in, short, heavy, final. Client says if we're not stable by end of day, they're terminating. I set my phone down and stared at my notebook. Everything in me wanted to jump in, to fix it, to stop the bleeding. That instinct had built my career. But I also knew the line. If I crossed it, Bram would use it. He'd call it unauthorized access. He'd call it sabotage. He'd call it whatever he needed. So I didn't move. I let the controls hold. And for the first time, I understood what following policy really meant. It wasn't obedience. It was protection. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. I was just finally watching the whole machine from the outside, seeing every lever, every shortcut, every lie, and I could already hear the outcome coming. Not like a crash, like a door closing. The next morning, I woke up to a calendar invite in my personal inbox. No subject line that screamed trouble. No dramatic wording, just one sterile title. Clarification call. The invite list was the part that made me sit up. Arden Sloan, legal. Nyla Var, HR Riva Malk, internal audit. Audit. Audit doesn't join calls to clarify. Audit joins to freeze the timeline before someone rewrites it. I made coffee, opened my notebook, laid out my screenshots, and joined 5 minutes early. Camera on, posture calm. If they wanted me emotional, they weren't getting it. Arden appeared first. Smooth voice, neutral face. Suit that probably cost more than my last bonus. Silas, Arden said, thank you for joining. We want to confirm a few details about yesterday's incident and your separation. I nodded once. I'll answer what I can. Nyla was next, stiff and quiet. She looked like someone who'd realized too late she was holding a match near a gas can. Then Riva joined. Riva didn't look like legal or HR. No polished performance. Just sharp eyes, minimal small talk, and the kind of calm that comes from trusting logs more than people. Riva said, "We're here because we have conflicting accounts." Good. That meant Bram had already started talking. Arden began with the safe questions. When I joined the bridge, what I observed, what steps I took. I walked through the timeline from my notes, clean and concise, like I was reading a flight checklist. Then Arden asked the question I'd been waiting for. Did you refuse to assist after termination? I didn't blink. No, I said. I was instructed not to access systems. So I didn't. Arden's pen paused. And you understood that instruction? Yes, I said. If I touched the environment after termination, that would be unauthorized access. I wasn't going to do that. Riva leaned forward slightly. Who submitted the break glass request? She asked. I did, I said. During the incident. It was pending approval when HR called. Riva's eyes flicked down. And who was supposed to approve it? I answered carefully. My manager, Bram Hollis, or the duty manager if Bram delegated. Arden exchanged a quick glance with Nyla. Then Riva spoke again and her tone changed. Not hostile, just surgical. We pulled the privileged access logs, she said. We see the request. We see the ticket. We also see your access revocation. Those timestamps are clear. I kept my face neutral, but inside I felt something loosen. Because if Audit had the logs, Bram was already bleeding. He just didn't know it yet. Arden tried one more angle. Bram stated that you were difficult during the incident, and that you implied you wouldn't help unless you received additional compensation. I let the silence sit for half a second. Then I said, "That's false." Riva didn't ask me to argue. She said, "We also have an external artifact." That phrasing made my spine straighten. Riva continued, "Kestrel Pay records vendor incident calls. They provided the recording with their escalation packet. There it was, a third-party record, outside Bram's control." Riva looked at her notes and read one line, word for word without dramatizing it. Bram said, "Silas walked away. He chose not to help us." Riva looked up at me. "Did you say you were walking away?" "No," I said. I said I needed approval to finish safely, and I asked for 10 minutes to document a handoff. Riva nodded as if she already knew. Then she asked the question that wasn't about me at all. "Did Bram instruct anyone to use his credentials after you were terminated?" I paused. Not long, just enough to be precise. "I didn't witness that," I said, "but I was told by a teammate that Bram was pressuring staff to bypass controls." Riva's face didn't change. She just wrote something down. Arden tried to keep it contained. "Silas," Arden said, "we're assessing whether process was followed appropriately." I answered with the simplest truth I had. Process can't be followed if the approver refuses to approve and removes the person doing the work. A beat of silence. Then Riva spoke again. "We also found something else," she said. She didn't say it like a trap. She said it like a fact. The access revocation was initiated within minutes of the termination call. That's normal, but the termination itself was scheduled in the HR system hours earlier, before the incident escalated. My throat went dry, because that meant what I'd suspected was true. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made during chaos. This was set up. Arden's voice got careful. "We're not here to discuss intent," Arden said quickly. "We're here to establish facts." Riva's eyes stayed on me. "Facts are the intent," she said, calm. And in that moment, I realized Bram had made a classic mistake. He thought the story was about control. But in a company with real governance, the story is about traceability. You can talk your way through a meeting. You can intimidate your way through a team. You can fire your way out of a conflict. But you can't charm an audit trail. Arden cleared his throat. "Silas," he said, "legal is prepared to adjust your separation terms to reflect." Riva cut him off with one sentence. "Before we discuss terms, we need to address the client exposure." Then she looked directly into the camera. "Kestrel Pay is citing two things, outage impact and governance failure." I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. But inside, the tension started to turn into something else. Because governance failure wasn't a vague complaint. It had names attached. Riva's phone buzzed. She glanced down, then back up. "Update," she said. "Bram Hollis has been placed on administrative leave. Effective immediately. Pending investigation." Nyla's face changed. Not shock. More like someone watching a floor give way under a chair. Arden exhaled like he'd just lost control of the room. And I sat there, still and quiet, feeling the strange kind of satisfaction that doesn't feel like victory, but like gravity returning. A minute later, my phone buzzed. Amen. 2 messages. Holy, Bram got walked out. "They're asking everyone for logs." I looked back at the call. Riva was already moving forward. "We'll send a formal request," she said. "Silas, we may need a written statement from you." I nodded. "I can provide a factual timeline." Arden tried to soften his tone. "We'd like this to stay confidential." I met his eyes through the camera. "It will," I said. "I'm not interested in noise. I'm interested in accuracy." The call ended shortly after. No apology. No dramatic closure. Just the feeling of a machine finally acknowledging what happened. I closed my laptop and sat there for a second, listening to my apartment again. Quiet. And for the first time since the termination call, I felt something close to control, because Bram had demanded I follow policy. And now the same policy he used as a weapon was doing what it was designed to do: pin the decision to the person who made it. And somewhere in that building, Bram was learning a lesson that never shows up on performance reviews, but always shows up in the logs. By Friday, the company felt like it was holding its breath. Not in a dramatic way, more like the kind of quiet you hear after a near-miss accident, when everyone keeps doing their job but nobody jokes in the hallways. I wasn't inside the building anymore, but I still heard it through people who trusted me. Eamon called that morning and didn't even say hello. "They terminated," he said. "Kestrel pay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "They're out. They're using the recording and the access logs as leverage. Legal couldn't spin it." I closed my eyes for a second. Kestrel Pay wasn't just a client. They were the logo leadership put on slides to impress investors. Losing them wasn't a bruise, it was a fracture. Eamon kept talking, voice low. "And it's not just the client. Audit is going through everything. Emergency changes, privileged access, manager approvals, who touched what, when." I pictured Riva's face on that call, calm, sharp, unmoved by excuses. That wasn't a review. That was a teardown. 2 hours later, Arden from legal emailed me again, not to clarify this time, to negotiate. The subject line read, "Separation Terms, Amendment." Inside was a short message and an attachment. No emotional language, no moral statements, just controlled legal tone. They offered a better severance package, extended health coverage, a neutral reference, and a mutual clause that basically said nobody would trash the other side publicly. It was the kind of offer companies make when they want to close a door quietly before someone else opens it louder. I read it slowly, not because I was tempted to fight, because I wanted the ending to be clean. I replied with one condition, one sentence that mattered more than the money. I will sign if the amendment includes written acknowledgement that I was terminated during an active production incident and instructed not to access company systems, and that any remediation after that point was performed without my involvement. I didn't accuse Bram, I didn't dramatize it, I just demanded the truth be placed where it couldn't be edited later. Arden responded within an hour. Accepted? That's when I knew Bram was finished, because legal doesn't agree to language like that unless the alternative is worse. And the alternative, based on what audit already had, was probably much worse. That afternoon, Eamon texted me a final update. Bram fired for cause. I stared at the words for a long moment, feeling not joy, relief. I called Eamon and asked, "For cause meaning what?" Eamon let out a breath. "Pressuring staff to bypass privileged access controls, attempting to use shared credentials, misrepresenting facts on a recorded client call, retaliation." Retaliation. That word landed heavy. It meant the company wasn't just calling Bram careless. They were calling him intentional. And it meant my instinct that I was being set up mid-fix wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. Over the next week, 2 things happened that closed the story so cleanly it almost felt scripted. First, audit rolled out a new emergency change process. Not a dramatic overhaul. Just 3 hard rules that now lived in the workflow, where nobody could ignore them. Emergency approvals required written confirmation in the ticket. Privileged access requests required a named approver, who could not be the incident commander. Termination actions during active incidents required legal and audit sign-off. It was boring operational stuff, which is exactly why it mattered. Because boring rules are what stop loud people from improvising with other people's careers. Second, I got a call from Riva. Not a friendly call, not a warm one, a professional one. "Silas," she said, This is closed from our side. Your timeline matched the system record. Thank you for being precise. That was her version of a compliment. Then she added something I didn't expect. Your manager tried to claim you abandoned the incident, but the sequence shows you requested the correct access path and were blocked. That detail mattered. I swallowed once, because that detail wasn't just about me. It was about every person Bram would have thrown under the bus next. When the call ended, I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the same notebook where I'd written the timeline. It hit me then, how small the difference was between disaster and closure. If I'd argued on the bridge, Bram would have painted me as unstable. If I'd jumped in after termination, he would have called it unauthorized access. If I'd tried to save the day emotionally, I would have handed him the rope. Instead, I did something quieter. I followed policy, not like a rule-following robot, like someone who understood that policies are only annoying until the day they're the only thing between you and a lie. A month later, I started a new job at a smaller company with better governance and less theater. On my first week during onboarding, the security lead said something that made me almost laugh. "We take privileged access seriously," he said. "No shared credentials. Everything logged." I nodded like it was normal. But inside, I felt that calm satisfaction again. The kind that doesn't need revenge fantasies, because the ending wasn't me winning with a stunt. It was me getting my name out of Bram's story and into the only place that matters in corporate life, the record. And if there's one lesson I'll carry forever, it's this. When someone tells you to follow policy with a smirk, do it. Not because they deserve obedience, because they just challenged you to let the system prove what they did. And the system always remembers.